There is a reason people sometimes panic when you stop responding, and it has very little to do with missing you. Sometimes, they miss the access they had to you. Your instant replies, your attention, your emotional reactions, your willingness to explain yourself. Your availability became predictable. And once something becomes predictable, people stop appreciating it. They start expecting it. That's why the moment you become less available, the entire dynamic can change. Suddenly, they notice your silence. They wonder where you are, what you're thinking, whether you've changed, and most importantly, whether they still have the same access to you. But here's where most people misunderstand the concept. Unavailability isn't about ignoring people. It isn't revenge. It isn't pretending you're too important to care. It's something much deeper. It's the ability to withdraw your attention without losing your peace. And once you learn that, you stop being controlled by the expectations of other people. Module 1. The Trap of Predictability. Think about the person who is always available. You message them. They respond. You call. They answer. You need reassurance. They're there. You disappear for 3 days. And they still welcome you back like nothing happened. At first, this looks like kindness. And sometimes it is. But there is a hidden danger. Constant availability can turn your presence into a utility. People don't consciously think, this person is an emotional tool. But behavior can create that dynamic. If someone knows you'll always answer, they don't have to value your attention, because they never have to earn it. Imagine a door that is always unlocked. Eventually, you stop thinking about the door. You simply walk through it, but close the door occasionally, and suddenly people become aware that it exists. This is why boundaries can completely transform relationships. Not because you're manipulating someone, but because you're teaching them something important. Your attention has a cost, not a financial cost, a psychological one. Your attention comes from your time, your energy, your focus, your life. And every time you give it away automatically, you're giving away a piece of your existence. Schopenhauer understood something uncomfortable about human beings. The more intensely you live inwardly, the less dependent you become on constant external stimulation. He argued that solitude can become a refuge for the person capable of thinking deeply. Because when you're constantly surrounded by noise, you rarely discover what your own mind sounds like. And this leads to the second transformation. Because when you stop reacting instantly, something strange happens. Not just to other people, to you. Module 2. Jung and the energy you keep giving away. Carl Jung describes psychic energy as a fundamental force within the psyche. Your attention goes somewhere. Your emotions go somewhere. Your thoughts go somewhere. And whatever constantly captures your attention begins to occupy your inner world. Think about how much mental energy can disappear into one person. Why haven't they replied? What did they mean by that? Should I message again? Why did they like that post? Why are they acting differently? You might not be talking to them, but you're still emotionally interacting with them. That's the hidden cost. Someone can have your attention without having your presence, and sometimes without even knowing it. This is where strategic retreat becomes powerful. When you stop responding to every stimulus, you begin collecting your attention back. You stop asking, what are they doing? And start asking, what am I doing with my life? That shift is enormous, because your attention is one of the most valuable things you possess. And when you stop constantly directing it outward, you create space for something Jung considered essential: individuation, the process of becoming more fully yourself. Solitude isn't always loneliness. Sometimes solitude is where your identity finally becomes audible. And here's the fascinating part. When you stop filling every silence, other people may begin filling it for you. They start wondering. They start projecting. They start confronting thoughts they previously distracted themselves from. Your silence doesn't necessarily create their thoughts. It reveals them. And if you're learning to protect your attention, to become less reactive, and to build a mind that doesn't depend on constant validation, subscribe. This channel is for people who choose depth over noise, self-mastery over impulse, and peace over unnecessary drama. Because the strongest version of you isn't the loudest one. It's the one who no longer needs to react to everything. Module 3. Strategic unavailability versus coldness. But there's an important distinction. Because becoming unavailable can come from two completely different places. One is insecurity. The other is sovereignty. Coldness says, I'm going to ignore you so you understand how much you hurt me. Sovereignty says, I don't need to punish you. I simply have other things to give my attention to. That's the difference. Ghosting someone to provoke anxiety isn't power. Ignoring someone because you want them to chase you isn't emotional maturity. And pretending you don't care, when you desperately want them to notice, isn't detachment. It's performance. Real unavailability feels different. You don't disappear to be noticed. You become less available because your life became bigger. You have work to do, things to learn, people to love, goals to pursue, a body to take care of, a mind to develop, a future to build. You aren't sitting in your room thinking, I wonder if they noticed I haven't replied. You're not thinking about them at all. That's the difference. Strategic retreat isn't about controlling someone else's emotions. It's about controlling your own. And ironically, that is often what makes your presence more powerful. Because when you aren't constantly available, your presence becomes intentional. When you speak, it means something. When you show up, it matters. When you leave, there is actually something missing. Module 4. Why deep thinkers need solitude. Look at some of history's greatest thinkers. Writers, philosophers, scientists, artists, people who changed how humanity understood itself. Many deliberately created periods of isolation, not because they hated humanity, but because profound thinking requires something modern life constantly destroys: silence. Schopenhauer famously valued solitude because he believed intellectual independence required distance from the crowd. And Jung spent enormous amounts of time exploring the inner world of the psyche. The lesson isn't that you should abandon everyone. The lesson is simpler. You cannot hear your own thoughts when you're constantly listening to everyone else's. Modern life rewards instant reaction. Notifications, messages, opinions, trends, arguments. Everyone wants your attention. Everyone wants a response. Everyone wants access. And if you give it all away, you eventually become a stranger to yourself. Deep thinkers understand something different. Sometimes, you need to disappear from the noise, so you can return to yourself. Not permanently, not dramatically, just long enough to remember who you are without an audience. Module 5. The rebirth. And eventually, something changes. You stop checking who viewed your story. You stop wondering why someone hasn't replied. You stop rewriting messages. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop explaining every decision. You stop chasing people who are comfortable losing you. Not because you became heartless, because you became occupied with something more important: your own life. And this is the paradox of unavailability. When you stop desperately trying to be valued, you become harder to take for granted. When you stop demanding attention, your attention becomes more meaningful. When you stop chasing connection, you begin attracting relationships that don't require you to chase. And when you stop being afraid of solitude, you become much harder to manipulate through loneliness. That's what Jung's individuation ultimately points toward: becoming yourself, even when the crowd would prefer a version of you that is easier to control. And perhaps that's what deep thinkers eventually discover. You don't need to make yourself difficult to access. You simply need to stop making yourself easy to consume. Your time matters. Your attention matters. Your peace matters. And your presence should be something you consciously give, not something people automatically receive. So the next time someone asks, "Why have you been so quiet?" you don't need a dramatic explanation. You don't need to make them jealous. You don't need to prove that you've changed. Sometimes the most powerful answer is simply to continue building your life. Because real unavailability isn't, "I don't need anyone." It's, "I don't need constant access to other people to feel whole." That's emotional sovereignty. That's self-mastery. And that's when everything changes. If you're choosing your peace over unnecessary noise, Comment, I choose my peace. And if this video made you look differently at your own availability, subscribe, because the goal isn't to become colder. It's to become harder to distract, harder to manipulate, and impossible to separate from yourself. Your attention is your life. Spend it accordingly.